Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Hi, everyone who's streaming in as well. Welcome to Who Knew, an exploration of the Jewish experience, and sponsored in part by Jewish Nevada, and thanks to our Temple Sinai Board of Directors as well. This afternoon, Rabbi Ben is going to be having a conversation about taking social action, something especially dear to me. Back about 10 years ago, I chaired the Social Action Committee here at the synagogue. And at that time, we had several members, one of whom stood out as outstanding and ended up becoming the chair after I stepped back, and that was Tova McGilvray. And ultimately, you can see how much social action she's been taking over the decade because she's president of our congregation now. So this is a near and dear topic, and I hope by the end of the afternoon it will be to you as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rabbi Benjamin Zober and Tova McGilvray. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Tova, for being here. So we'll dive right into it. I met you at Sinai. What brought you here for the first time?
So what brought me here for the first time, this was before you and Sarah joined our synagogue. I was working, still doing title. I was an escrow assistant at the time, and my escrow officer that I worked for was Temple Sinai member Suzanne Silverman, who was a great friend and mentor to me. And as she got to know me better as her new assistant, and knowing that we had this Jewish connection, especially when she started to learn about the political and social action work that I did on my own, she said, you have to meet Rabbi Ethan Bear. And so she arranged for the two of us to have a coffee. So I really met Rabbi Bear before I ever came to Temple Sinai. For people that don't know, Reno is my hometown. I was raised in Reno, but I grew up at Temple Emmanuel. And during the college and first husband years, had kind of drifted away from being affiliated with a synagogue. So I was a bit of a free agent when Rabbi Bear and I went for coffee, and meeting for coffee with Rabbi Bear very quickly became, well, you should come to one of our social action meetings. And so those were really my first interactions with Temple Sinai, and eventually that started to encompass worship service, which really started with the Tot Shabbats, because there's nothing I love than showing up to a room full of children and being the one who knows what's going on, sandbagging a room of kids. And then the more I got to meet the people here, it became clear that this was a place for me.
Wonderful. Well, certainly we are very, very glad that all those things fell into place and that we have you as part of this community. So you mentioned that you originally from here and grew up in Emmanuel. Was there any kind of trepidation or, oh no, I'm betraying my youth or my background by coming over to the Reform side?
The Reform side. I did have to get used to instruments on Shabbat services. There was a good chunk of time where that ooked me out a little bit. I was like, but I was already driving to services, and of course we had the lights and everything like that. So I don't know why the instruments represented something kind of different for me. I don't think I had too many reservations of coming over. I think really I'm going to say, but none of the people who are going to be offended are watching, so I'm just going to say it. I think in some ways I had really pulled back from synagogue affiliation in a conservative synagogue sense as I became a young person who voted, a young person who became aware of where my personal politics fell in the world. And in a more conservative synagogue, I felt like I had to be closeted about my political and personal affiliations in order to exist in that space. And, again, through the university years, I just felt like those two parts of my identity didn't occupy the same space. And so I felt the separation. And then when I came to Temple Sinai, it was like, oh, I can be progressive and Jewish. Like for me, those two things had never existed in the same space before, even though my parents are absolute like red dirt Democrats. But just to not have to be quiet about things that I was particularly passionate about. Some of those very specifically at the time would be like LGBTQ and trans rights, and the plight of our homeless people here in Reno. So just to find a space where I could be a bleeding snowflake liberal and like, sorry, that's what I think that's what I'm here to talk about. Is what brought me. I do not speak for all of Temple Sinai. This is a very unusual chance that I have to get to just speak as Tova. I think a lot of times when I'm wearing my president hat, I have to keep some of my own personal opinions out of it and make sure that I'm saying things that can encompass the wide variety of beliefs of all of our congregants. But right now you invited me to speak, so that's what I'm going to say.
Appreciate that. Well, and I think that I at least from everything I've seen and any conversation I've ever had with Rabbi Katz and Rabbi Fassman for him, we're not so territorial as though it's someone wanders in who has chosen a different affiliation and the prodigal son returns or what are you doing here? I think we're too small a community to be separate, and I think that we have a lot of things that we do together, and I always hope we do more. And I think that there are separate identities between the congregations, and
I think that's why it's so important. I'm so committed that all of them exist.
Yes,
because I think there needs to be a choice for everybody to feel comfortable. One of the things that we joke at is, so I obviously attend here at Temple Sinai. My mom goes to Temple Emmanuel. Her husband, Hal, goes to Chabad. And we think that's a very Reno way to do it. And we each kind of selectively pop in at each other's things. I actually think that Temple Emmanuel and Temple Sinai have enjoyed more cooperation and participation in things since I took a leadership position at Temple Sinai, because I still am involved there at Emmanuel and know all sorts of people and go to things to support my mom and her friends. And so I try to bring the collaboration with me. Collaboration more than separation. And certainly beliefs and mores have evolved a lot since when I was a kid. I think some of the things I originally stepped back from at a conservative synagogue are no longer the prevailing sentiment, which used to be much more homophobic. I think when I was a kid, 14, 15, just an immediate post bat mitzvah, which would have been the late 90s here in Reno, Nevada. I think a more homophobic stance was a bit more accepted, and now just societally, everybody has taken a big step forward together. Marriage equality, just writ large for America, has done a lot for us. So, when I was younger, I think it felt like a very personal stance, and now, I just don't even have to think about it as much anymore. So, but that was probably me having a bit of an overreaction to some individuals. And when you're younger, you just have a harder time separating those things. So a lot of my own growing up in that too.
Well, ideally we all grow up.
Yes.
So, and I think that something that's really interesting is when people grow up somewhere and then go away for some time and then come back. Mm-hmm. And one tendency is to go to all the things that we used to do, go to the same restaurants, go to the same synagogue, have the same habits and hobbies and things. And other times we come back and we say, I'm different in some ways. I've grown, I've changed, I've experienced new things. And to have the courage to try something else and find something that works for us as adults. And I honestly, it's something that's most people don't do. Most people fall back into the exact same sorts of patterns that they did, and even if it doesn't necessarily serve them. And the fact that you have charted a new path certainly just speaks to your character. I wonder, now that I'm thinking about it, that are there other sort of Reno pieces or other parts of being in this sort of area where you came back and went, maybe I could do something different, or something where you said, no, I've seen the world, but I still cannot resist whatever it is.
So I think my whole personal emotional growth story is a very Reno story. So if you had spoken to me when I was a young person, teens and younger, it was all about art and theater and dance. And those were the things that I was singularly focused on. Any volunteering, I always had a volunteer streak in me, but it was always done for those arts organizations, and volunteering for Bruca Theater, and and that was really my focus. And that's what I thought, the last bastion of free speech was the theater, and where my impact was going to happen. And then when I came back to Reno in following the university years, moved back to Reno, I was a founder of an art show called, at the very first year, it was called Dada Motel, and the next year it became Nada Dada. And the premise of this art show, we were covered by the New York Times in one of our years. It was a disorganization, deliberately. And the whole premise was that you would rent a motel room and have a show. Rent a room, have a show. That was like our motto of how it's done. So it was kind of an example of functional anarchy. And it was, how can local artists have a showing without having to be part of the local politics of the museum culture or gallery culture or even art town, loving all of those institutions, but just seeing that they were also just as likely a place for emerging artists to be boxed out of. So we came up with this kind of anarchist idea, this Dada Motel, rent a motel room, make a show. Well, that brought me really up close with all of a sudden the reality of people who lived out of those motel rooms and the logistics and still politics of what it takes to be able to rent a room and afford them, and how tenuous that spot was. And so my personal activism shifted really quickly from being all about promoting Reno arts and culture, the Reno arts, to, oh my gosh, we have all of these good, hardworking, trying really hard people who are one paycheck away from having nothing, who were on the street yesterday, but this week got a motel, but won't know what they'll be able to do next week. And that kind of really changed. I mean, and in all of this, we're talking, I'm like 22, like that frontal lobe is still just solidifying at that point. I know that these problems had been there, but seeing it as something that I was a part of was still a little bit of a newer discovery for me. And so that really started to shift the things that I was aware of in Reno and what I was doing, where before it had been, I still really believe in the arts, but I just saw it as something very, very separate. And then my sense of self started to expand. And so I feel like I'm missing a gap in time of what I used to do. But, I know I was doing work with Planned Parenthood. I was doing work for the benefit of the Reno Housing Authority. And at some point in there, a girlfriend of mine who was already a Rotarian, kind of maybe through a theater roundabout way, she said, I'm having a theatrical emergency. And I was like, I've trained my life for this moment. What can I do? But I helped them out with an issue they were having on their fundraiser where they needed a theater person on very short notice. But then I got involved in Rotary, and that really became very, very special for my life, and really gave me a way to first have really beautiful friends. I think one of the great things about social action is you start to surround yourself with really beautiful people very quickly who care about others. And so it's just like my two birds, one stone. It's like you get to pay your rent as the citizen of the world and tikkun olam and get to give back a little bit. But all of a sudden you're like, oh, these people are lovely and I do enjoy spending time with you. And how much nicer is that? I get to do these two activities at once. And the Rotary and Rotary International has just been a really great way to see all of the other organizations that are in Reno doing service and working on their mission, because a lot of the different organizations will come before Rotary. You have weekly speakers with Rotary, and so you really get to see community leaders and organizers from all sorts of different organizations coming to speak to Rotarians to try to get their message out. Mm-hmm. And so that became a really big part of what I did. And in Rotary, they talk about the different areas of service. And one of the areas of service is service to the club. And that's where you're choosing to spend your energy as some sort of club administrator or leader, because that needs to happen as well. Like, organizations do need people who are willing to not just be on the front lines picketing or making the speeches, but also like building the registration sheets and manning the website. And, it takes people to do these things. And so I think when I started doing service to the club through Rotary, it gave me permission to see a lot of these administrative tasks as part of my service, where before I kind of felt like if you weren't out there, on the picket lines, like you weren't doing anything or weren't doing enough. So it just also helped me expand my sense of what service is, which is good because you don't have time to do everything. Oh my gosh.
I'm glad to hear you say that. We sometimes worry that you're taking on too much. So well, I wonder. I know that you've brought a lot of things from Rotary into your work here in the community, and I wonder, as you're describing the different roles and people taking on that, I wonder if that's if you've done it. I haven't explicitly noticed it, but is that something you've been trying to, or something that you would like to, maybe if you were to mention to the rabbi, to have an ally in trying to build that same sort of ethos in this community?
So if I had my blank check, if I didn't have historical context to work within, and I got to kind of not overhaul, I don't want to overhaul Temple Sinai, but if I got to enact a bit more of some of those Rotary tactics, a couple of things that I would change. So in Rotary, we talk about branding membership foundation as this constant feeding circle of each other. So branding, if people don't know they're at a Rotary event, and I've tried to say that a lot at Temple Sinai, like, it's really great when we take a picture and everyone's smiling faces there, but like, if there's nothing that tells you that this was a Temple Sinai event, like, what does that mean? So trying to invest in some recognition and making sure that we're saying the name and wearing the shirts and putting the watermark on things, and that it's being done consistently. So branding, once you get people to know that they're at a Temple Sinai event, then they start to feel a connection to the organization. It's really a connection to people. That's what happens as you go to something and you make a connection with a person. But it's important that they remember that person happened at a Temple Sinai event. And so then that goes to membership. And they start to see, like, oh, if I want to have more of these connected experiences, I should probably consider investing in membership. And then membership feeds, in the Rotary context, membership feeds foundation. So the Rotary Foundation is a very special investment vehicle that they have. It's really powerful, where the Rotary funds are invested. The dividends of those funds is what pays for the administrative support of Rotary International. And then all the rest of those funds on kind of a 3-year cycle is returned back to the clubs through the district and world grants. here at Temple Sinai, we kind of are, that foundation piece is a little ambiguous. So there's some things we do through Jewish Nevada that gives a better sense of foundation. So that's part of why I'm a supporter of Jewish Nevada. When we do their fundraisers through a similar mechanism, that's how money makes it back into our local communities. We then apply for grants for Jewish Nevada, and it keeps the money here in Northern Nevada. At Temple Sinai, we kind of ask people to continue to engage philanthropically with Temple Sinai and to make donations to our annual budget or the Marsha Cohen Fund. But that foundation piece could be strengthened a bit, so that there's just a better mechanism of where are the funds going, how are administrative costs paid off of those. And then those whole things connect together. In Rotary, when we start talking about foundation, the Rotary Foundation is an international organization. So even though you're only in your Reno club doing Reno club things, you can look at international projects going on, whether that's immunizing the world against polio or being involved in bringing clean water to developing nations or peace talks. And you can take pride and know that you're part of that. I think Temple Sinai, if I were given free reign, I would perhaps like to look at and strengthen our relationship with either other existing foundations or even the URJ. I mean, I think it all needs to be evaluated. You can't just take it all writ large and run with it. But if we could make a bit of a stronger connection to some international Jewish organizations and federations that are out there doing their thing, I have this theory that our people would feel a stronger sense of ownership with those projects and know that when they support Temple Sinai, that they really are having an impact in the world. Because I think that's what people want. They want to feel that they're having an impact. If I'm going to spend my time and if I'm going to spend my money, what is it for? Because it can't just be friendship. I got plenty of friends that I'm not spending time with, my buddies from college, book club girlfriends. So it's like, why am I choosing Temple Sinai friends over all these other friends? And it can't just be about friendship. It has to be about impact. I think people need to feel that when they're spending their time here, it's contributing to something bigger than themselves. Right now, our biggest drum that we can beat in that regard is our Sinai school, and getting people to feel like, okay, when I contribute to Sinai and support Sinai, I really am investing in the next generation. Thank goodness the kids are so cute. They do a lot of selling that for us. But I theorize that if we had perhaps a stronger connection to the Jewish Federation, and I mean, we are a URJ synagogue. I'm not trying to deny that, but we tend to not amplify that sometimes because there's divisive politics in there. It's harder to grasp to, but that would be, and this is just a Tova McGilvray opinion, not your temple president speaking, but I do think sometimes if we could share messaging with a bigger organization, people might feel that their impact is bigger than just what's at the Oneg on Friday. Right. So,
well, I for one think we should welcome our URJ overlords. But Rika Jacobs, if you're watching, call me. We'll talk. We're doing amazing things here. But the way you're describing it is something that I think that a lot of people don't realize. I think there was a time when people affiliated and they contributed and donated time, money, resources as a given. That was the model of American. It was the Protestant model of American religious life, and increasingly we have lots of things that are pulling on our interests, our time, our finances, and there are still some people who they belong and they contribute because that's just what you do. There are other folks who say there are a lot of things that are meaningful to me. And I want to know that what I'm doing is, one, going to have an impact, and two, is a good investment. Mm-hmm. And that's often a hard sell in the nonprofit world, in part because you're not going to get a monetary return by investing in a community. There are certainly communities out there who are telling you that if you believe, you will prosper. There are very specific prophets in the Tanakh that warn against that and tell you that is not the way to go, and it's certainly not how we do things. But the benefits are other, but not insubstantial. And I think that's one of the challenges that we have, is helping people understand that, and to contribute, and knowing that there are so many other good things. There are so many incredible organizations that are making a difference. And if people have limited resources, as most people do, there's only so much they can give, and they will inevitably have to make a choice.
I think one of the things that I've really been enjoying most recently in my Temple Sinai service I had the opportunity to step into this in a bit bigger role during the rabbinic sabbatical, was some of the pastoral care that went on over the summer. And my goodness, I mean, it didn't take an entire organization and a 501c3 tax designation to visit somebody at the hospital and to, help somebody get a ride somewhere, and in really quiet ways, almost in ways that it was like, man, we've moved so far away from just directly helping each other, and sort of have built into this myth that everything has to go through these organizations, and that I don't have the capacity to do it. I need to be working with an organization that helps elderly people. It's like, you can just go. You could just go and bring a meal or have a sit with someone. And some of the friends that I've made over the summer by just personally being willing to go and do the mitzvah of sit with someone who's sick or sit with the grieving, has been deeply meaningful. And so if anybody feels burdened by bureaucracy, that would maybe be an avenue I would encourage them to explore, is how can we get you directly connected with someone who needs some services? And you got to have boundaries. You can't take on someone's entire success or health or something like that. But you can have a very real impact and really feel that you improved someone's day or week, without having to do a lot of red tape and without having to do it for any money. And so that's one thing that I think I've been exploring more over this summer, a bit out of necessity, and now I'm just kind of like in it.
Yeah,
I'm like, wow, yeah, please call on me. I also feel more people would do hospital visits if they just understood like where to park.
Yeah,
I
am with you 1,000%. There's a lot of things I don't want to do because I don't know where I'm putting the car. Yeah,
well,
hospital I do know. I've been there enough times. It's a nice garage. They have space for everyone.
So I was talking to somebody about like the meal train recently. I was talking to somebody, and we recently had a meal train that we struggled a little bit to get some people participating in, and it was because the meal train specifically, this recipient needed gluten-free meals. And some people who were regular meal train participants said they felt so intimidated by that. They didn't know, and even if they thought they knew how to prepare a gluten-free meal, they were so anxious about the consequences of possibly getting it wrong that they chose just to sit this one out.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, like I hear that. And so now I know the next time that we run a meal train with that sort of dietary restriction, that we need to provide some more resources, or even, gift cards from this restaurant that does gluten-free would be appreciated as an alternative. Because I think people want to help. One Rotary, if you've talked to me at all about service, I bring up this term that I learned in Rotary called fellowship. Mm-hmm. So fellowship, everybody knows fellowship, but fellowship. And so if we there's a lot of people who are around, want to help, willing to help, able to help. They just don't have the bandwidth to lead the project. So they don't want to be in leadership, but they are ready and willing for followship, and they will follow you as long as somebody gives them competent leadership. And so I'd really try to identify projects that we can do that are not endless tasks with really difficult metrics. You know, we try to say, like, this is a thing we're doing on this day. It starts here, it ends here. Here is the very specific activity you can do to help, and let people participate, and then feel the good, get those warm and fuzzies, and then be like, okay, I did my thing.
Yeah.
And not have to worry about like the continuation and what comes next. So
Well, we should talk with the leadership of Temple Sinai.
we should
and
talk
maybe
with the
get them
leadership
to
about
work on that a little bit. So, oh wow. Are there any projects or causes that you see in the community, and you think this is something that Temple Sinai we have the means, the ability, maybe even the duty to get, and you sort of have on your, I don't want to say your sort of ideological wish list, but something that you sense maybe something only we can do, or something that others are doing, and we could be a part of, because so many options.
Well, I think one thing that a house of worship is uniquely addressed to tackle, as opposed to some other aid organizations out there, is the epidemic of loneliness. Jill just mentioned it to me in a totally separate conversation, but I think when people think about a synagogue or a church, there is a very reasonable expectation of a sense of belonging. That, you know, when you go to Keep Truckee Meadows Beautiful, or you know, something to raise money for the kids or for cancer research, you know, you expect your connection to community to be, you know, okay, I attended that thing, and while I was there, that felt really good, but now that's done. Where in a religious organization, you know, that's not just sharing space together. You do want it to translate into genuine friendships and spending time together that isn't always structured around an activity that the synagogue is putting on. And so I think that might be an area, if we wanted to talk about projects that are specific that Temple Sinai might look at and benefit from. I think it's really kind of looking at some of our, and not even our older members, like being lonely can happen to students. That's part of how I ended up moving back to Reno. Was I started university in Chicago and became incredibly homesick, incredibly fast. And it wasn't for lack of getting involved in things. I was in school productions. I was trying to connect with arts people and volunteering at different theaters. Remember, I was still very much the theater kid at the time. But I felt like it was all really like, thanks for coming. And then that vacuum of loneliness that I felt after I left something almost made it worse. And so that homesickness and that loneliness was what brought me back to Reno, where I realized I had family and I had lifetimes of friends and their parents, and something that actually felt like a community. So that is something that I think a synagogue should look at pretty seriously, as is this a duty that we have? Because there are other, you know, unless we're committed to being a food pantry, we can't be a food pantry. Unless we're committed to being a rideshare organization, it's hard to be a rideshare organization. There are a lot of things that other 501c3s do better. And if we had the means to do everything, I would love for us to get involved in everything. But there are some things that we can do better than those other organizations. And that's actually caring about who our people are, not just as donors. So I I'm not telling tales out of school. Nothing's happening yet, but there is, I got to attend a meeting of the JFSA, which is based out of, right now they have Southern Nevada presence. What is that? The Jewish
Family Service.
Jewish Family Services. And so they were doing kind of a fact-finding mission of what it would look like to bring something like that up here. And I do genuinely hope that they can, over the next few years, see their way into expanding into Northern Nevada. So this would be an organization with actual caseworkers and social workers who really help people get connected to the other organizations that provide those support services and get people into help pipelines. And okay, let's get you registered for SNAP, and let's get you doing this, and let's get you into a Meals on Wheels program, and like do something like that. Because unfortunately, we just don't have the administrative staffing here to carry people through with them, when what they really need is a caseworker. We just don't have that. The best we can sort of do is, here's a list of things.
Yes.
So
Agreed. I cannot say enough good things about JFS or JFSA. I've worked with them in a number of different capacities in a number of different places throughout the country, and they just do unbelievable work. And I would love to have a presence up here, because it would be transformative. And it would be, there are so many times when we get calls from people and we just don't have that resource. I, as you said, I can suggest a name, I can maybe put it out, but I don't know and don't have that closeness. And that would really be amazing.
That would be a big thing that we would need. I think one of the struggles, and when we had this meeting, we were trying to impart to them how Northern Nevada is different. And one of the things that kept coming up was transportation is such a hard thing here. If you aren't somebody who drives, getting to anything is near impossible. What I wouldn't give to get just a city bus stop somewhere on this block would be extraordinary. Right now, the closest bus stop, I want to say, is about 3/4 of a mile away when it's going. And we would have a lot more opportunity for people. So we need to,
there are 5 or 6 houses of worship within about less than a mile of here. And the fact that there is not more easy access, and it's a citywide problem. It's not just everyone's getting around Reno except people who come to Temple Sinai. But you're right. You're absolutely right. That is an absolute barrier.
Yeah, and that's a very, you go to other cities and they don't have to struggle with that quite as much, or maybe they do. But I mean, it depends on the city. But that is a very specific Reno struggle that we see here is, if you don't have a vehicle, you get very isolated very fast.
So we have a few more minutes, but I wanted to abruptly switch gears on something. And I would like to feel that we are, as a community, are helping you fulfill a part of your identity that I think is still very important, and that is the theatrical element. You are, of course, star of our Purim spiels, part of the amazing group of folks who put that on. I don't mean to diminish you. You're the star. I mean, everyone is a star, but you have, not only do you take on whatever role we throw at you, but you've taken on a lot of the directing, all of the choreography, sometimes doing the set building. We made that Barbie box a few years ago on short notice, all those sorts of things. So one, I want to thank you and put an early plug. We're doing Chicago this year. If you're interested, please join us. It's going to be amazing. So the first question I have is, of the various roles that you've had, do you have a favorite?
So of the Purim spiel roles that I've gotten to play, I think my favorite was when I got to be Ken in our Barbie spiel. And maybe because it was so ridiculous with like the shorts and the hair and the thing, and the character like kind of hits on one note. And I sort of channeled my best Bill and Ted and did the thing. But like people really said, they were like, you became Ken. And that was very fun. Actually, what's really funny is that even when I was doing theater, I always ended up on the behind the scenes side of it. I mean, my training was me trying to be a leading lady and a dancer and an actress and be out there. But my skill set and what I was really good at really ended up making me stage manager, props manager, director, set designer. Like I always ended up behind the scenes a lot. So a lot of all the things that we do here at Temple Sinai, to me, still feels very much like I'm leveraging that skill set. Every time that we're changing over the space or running a sound check, you know, and trying to be mindful of like, okay, where's the flow of traffic and what is the lights going to look like when people walk in? Like just be thinking about those things for the space is exciting for me. I am really looking forward to doing Chicago. That happens to be a, so we try to alternate between doing classic and modern musicals and sort of toggle off. So if last year it was Oklahoma, which would be considered a more classic, now it's time to do one of the new generation musicals. But as a dancer, like the idea of getting to do things very Fosse is really exciting to me.
And terrifying to me.
Yes. So I'm really looking forward to Chicago. I would love to see the script since we're talking about such things, so I can start getting my part of the Mad Genius going. So yeah, that'll be a fun one.
Do you have like a dream show like Rabbi? We must turn this into a Purim spiel. Like I really want to do Avenue Q because I just want to see. I want to see you make puppets. I want a puppet of myself, and I can just write myself in that way, and I can be Princeton. But when we do Avenue Q, doing the puppets is going to be amazing, and I do love doing puppets. That's kind of a personal theatrical passion of mine, because there's so many things, especially when you're working with people who are not like trained thespians. If you put a puppet in front of them and you give them the instruction that like this is your actor and everything has to go through them, then they forget to think about this and they get it all right here. And what does this puppet want? And where is he looking? And what is he doing? And that, like, so many theatrical problems solve themselves. All of a sudden you can hear the person. All of a sudden their gestures are very intentional. And it's because they're not worrying about how they look. They have this externalization of all of that desire and what does this character want. And so puppets just make things. So whenever I used to work with kids, that's what I would immediately go to, is like, we're doing puppets. And then like, you didn't have stage fright, hard to hear, because the kid wanted their puppet to be heard and blah. So, love that. So yeah, really looking forward to doing an Avenue Q someday. You told me about this idea of doing West Side Story, which is another, cute. So if this year we're doing Chicago, then next year we should do West Side Story as our classic one again. And so we want to make this kind of an interfaith project and bring in some of the clergy from the other things for like, when you're a Chet. Yes, I've seen the idea with some of the members of the interfaith community. So
I think we can make it happen. I'm manifesting that into existence.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I was obsessed with Les Miserables. Like I still to this day am obsessed with this musical. I don't know that falls into our usual funny Purim spiel fare. Yeah, it's a little bit of a more serious tone.
I will say I know that one of our band of somewhat merry pranksters has been kicking around that idea. So.
Well, one of the things
I would not be opposed to someone bringing me something and saying if it's something that we can do. I mean,
it wouldn't be a spiel. It would be a more serious presentation of the work. But I think so. If you're familiar with the Les Miserables musical, what you have is this person who was a thief and escaped on his parole. And then rises to prominence. People don't know his history, and he's risen to prominence, and now he's the mayor of the town. and this ex-con is the good guy. And then you have the police officer who's been chasing him his entire career as this guy escapes justice, and that's our villain. So already you have this inversion of what the good guy and the bad guy are, just set up in the scheme of the premise of the original, like Victor Hugo, Les Miserables. And I think that disguise and swapping of the expected roles already fits so neatly into some of the things that are explored in the Purim story.
Yeah, if Esther stole a brooch from Pearl Nadelman, like that could just set up the entire thing.
So so I mean, it would be a more serious exploration of the Megillah than a usual spiel. And then you could bring in the innkeeper with some of the bawdriness. But I know. I think there's a lot about. And as we run out of time, actually, I want to steer the conversation in a slightly different direction as well. One of the things that I think about a lot, and I think maybe that's why I always loved the musical Les Miserables, and I think about it a lot in my Jewishness, and I know you and I have talked about it a bunch, is this idea of justice. And what is justice? And we know tzedek tirdorf, like justice you shall pursue. And there's a really fine line between justice and revenge. And justice and, like Jean Valjean in Les Miserables chasing somebody down to the ends of the earth over a very minor, and over stealing bread and then escaping parole. And when I worked for a while in the legal field, which we didn't even go into that, oh my goodness. I remember when I first started and I saw our firm defending somebody who was accused of some pretty horrific crimes. And I said, how do you do this? How do you defend somebody who's been accused of these things? And my stepfather was the attorney that I worked for. And he said, because everybody deserves justice. And sometimes that means representing people who are either accused of or even did terrible things, and making sure that they get a crime and a sentencing that is proportionate to, they get a sentencing that is proportionate to what the crime was and falls within the frame of that. And so even when we think about justice a lot for victims, but justice is a much bigger concept. And when I first started with the court system, I really thought that was how I was going to do God's work on earth, was through the legal field. You too. Yeah. And then I saw some things that were very confusing in that regard and very in the gray area. And I admire and really support everybody who has decided to make a career in our justice system, because it's so necessary. And for me personally, I also said, I think this is the best humans can do. And that I felt okay stepping out of that and being on something that was a bit more biased towards, actually taking care of people. Because what we can do with a legal justice system sometimes gets very weird, very fast. And my heart truly goes out to victims, and sometimes there can be a perversion in that as well, of clinging to something that can feel much closer to revenge than to justice. And you can never really make somebody whole, even through a settlement or a sentence. And so when we're here, I think a lot of when we're studying Torah and teaching Torah together, we start to give people the tools towards things like closure and forgiveness. And how do you continue to lead a good life even when you have hurt and regret in your past? And that, to me, feels a bit more in line with what my intentions always were. So that's part of what I think we're doing here. And I maybe in that way, I when I think about how Temple Sinai could do things, maybe I would like to see us become a bit more of a space for grief groups or victims groups and places where people can meet and continue to work on those softer, harder to achieve things like closure and forgiveness and moving on and finding a place to keep the past that isn't always part of your future story where it has to keep coming up. And those are some of the ways that I think a synagogue can help that no other, not-for-profit organization is going to have the framework for.
Yeah.
So,
thank you. So I think we have managed to save a few minutes for questions. If anyone has any questions, either here or online. Oh, Barton. All right.
You mentioned that when you started with the Rotaries, you did some picketing. What organizations did you picket?
Oh, let's see. Well, that might have not been through Rotary, different picketing. So sorry if I'm overlapping these, because Rotary is supposed to be a non-political organization, nonpartisan. So the very first activism I got involved in was, so I started school. I went to a Catholic university. I went to DePaul University because they had a great theater program. And that's where I met the nuns who were protesting against the death penalty. And I think that was the first protest that I ever personally attended, was standing by the sisters protesting against capital punishment on the stance that who are we to say? Who are we to enact such a final judgment upon someone? I was a freshman in college when the September 11th attacks happened. And we all watched that happen. And then, again, this is Tova speaking, not your president of Temple Sinai. I think we all watched a lot of political actors take that terrorism for their own agendas. And I was somebody who protested against the invasion of Iraq and the start of that war. That was also my first exposure to where anti-Semitism exists in those spaces. I was very shocked and surprised to see how quickly conversations turned from, America shouldn't invade Iraq, and then we'll deal with Israel next. And I was like, what? Whoa, hey, what? Like,
That took a turn.
I thought you were going to zig, and then you zagged. And that was also pretty eye-opening for me. So I think probably those were the things. I think by the time I got involved in Rotary, it's less picketing against things, and it was more positive of taking a stance for things. And I'm grateful to Rotary and the friends in my life who are so deliberate with trying to have positive interactions and affect positive change rather than just being against something. And so through Rotary, and certainly during the COVID years, Rotary International is a leader in disease prevention and vaccinations. And so that is something personally, and certainly through Rotary, that when disease prevention became very politicized in the COVID years, I was very proud to be aligned with an organization that had a stance of, an established place of being for science and medicine that prevented disease worldwide. And I don't think any of us saw it coming to our back doors. We'd always thought about like, oh, we're going to eradicate polio as this thing that had holdouts in like Afghanistan. And then all of a sudden it became a very like kitchen table conversation about whether people we knew were vaccinated against COVID or going to get vaccinated for COVID. And so that was kind of a more recent thing where I was just felt glad to be part of an organization that had a firm, positive stance on an issue. So
Thank you. That's a good question.
Liz, do you have a question? Sure. Oh, okay, here.
I just wanted to hear your favorite cause.
My favorite cause. So one that comes to mind is I so deeply believe in marriage equality, and I think, of course, now that everybody has the right to marry whomever they love, regardless of gender, that can feel like a done thing. But to me, particularly in a day and age where we're seeing certain decisions of the Supreme Court be overturned, that's one that's important for me to just make sure that we're being mindful, that we're keeping in there, that it's not always a given. I'm an escrow officer, so when people buy, sell, or refinance their homes, I get to be involved in that process. And I remember helping this young lesbian couple through a refinance where they had gotten married, like they were there like the first day that they were allowed to get married, and then they were getting divorced within a year. And they felt, particularly one of the young ladies, was really berating herself that her divorce somehow meant something about the right to marry. And we had a nice conversation where I said, like, your right to marry is also your right to get divorced, and your right to not lose everything that you bought this house together, and now it's not just getting ripped away from you because you have no protections. And so I think that's one's really important. Besides that, just women's reproductive health is probably another big just thing for me personally. My father, growing up now, he's since been retired for some time, but my dad was an abortion care provider for many years. When Dr. Tillman was assassinated, that was a colleague of my father's, and my dad's name was on the list. They recovered a list of target doctors from the assassin. My dad's name was on that list. I think I was 13 when I realized that my dad had to put on a bulletproof vest and carry a gun to go to work. Not, one in 5 women, 1 in 3 women have had an abortion. Sorry, I'm going to say this. I actually, I have my own abortion story, and I wrote about it for Glamour magazine. I was a contributor to a magazine and getting to share my story in that. And so I think just destigmatizing and it's that quote, and I never know who the quote is, but it's, no woman wants an abortion the same way she wants an ice cream cone. She wants an abortion the way that a coyote wants to chew off its own leg to get out of a trap. And just knowing that any woman's reason for doing that is very personal, and giving women, their personal situation, their family, and their doctors the right to make that decision for themselves. And just hearing in the news lately about particularly some women who want their children and maybe for some medical complication can't carry the baby to term and are now faced with those horrific decisions and all of those health risks. If that had been my story being told now, it would have been a non-viable fetus that I might be staring at having to carry completely to term. And I'm just very grateful that at the time that was my story, that it wasn't something that I had to have a debate with my politicians about. So.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, this went really.
And for your
really deep.
for
But
your
sharing that
advocacy
and saying that, statistically, 1 in 5, maybe as many as 1 in 3 women have had has an abortion story, and I think that's just something to really remember, is that this is not like some other people problem. So,
Thank you.
I have a question for
Yes.
you. how does your Judaism and Tikkun Olam and social action connect for you? And how could it connect for fellow Jews?
So the way that my mom always brought it into picture growing up is that Jews care about the here and now. We're not doing good deeds, and I'm not trying to dismiss anybody's belief, but from a Jewish perspective, we're not doing good deeds because of the promise of kingdom of heaven. It's not a reward in the afterlife of why we're doing good deeds. We do it because we have the here and now. This is our world, and we have to try to make it better. And on some end of that spectrum, maybe your good deed, maybe your mitzvah is going to be the one that makes the world ready for the Messiah. And that, like, now it can happen. Now it can happen. So that's it, depending on whether you just want to, like, keep that in a what personally motivates me in the world sort of sense, or even a more, add more religious tones to it. But I think the feeling deeply connected to the obligation of we need to try to improve this world and heal it and make it better while we're here for the people who are here and for future generations. But I think that's a really Jewish perspective, where other faith organizations might find their desire to clothe the naked and feed the hungry from a sense of a greater reward that will come to them in an afterlife, and just the sense of looking at our own brothers and sisters around us who are suffering, and that's enough of a motivation. That's what feels very Jewish to me about it. And there's really no promise on the other side of it. It's not a bargain that, if we do good deeds, I'm going to get my wings and a halo and a place in heaven as the trade-off for it. It's really just about we have an obligation to take care of each other. And so I feel like that was something that my mom, from like the earliest days of kind of understanding what made me different as a Jew, that was one of the things that she really imparted, is Jews care about the world that we live in right now and try to make it better.
Amen. Solid. All right. So unless we have any questions from our online guests, I think I will turn it back over to Jill to close things up.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention this year, we're focusing on social action in our community through our Who Knew program. Next month, November 2nd, Jane Townley and Jeff Gingold will be our featured guests, and they're going to be talking about welcoming the stranger and immigration. And I won't give any spoiler alerts, but several years ago, they were integral in organizing a way that Temple Sinai helped a family settle here in Reno. And they'll be speaking about that. And then in December 14th, we'll be looking at Hanukkah coming, which is all about conserving the oil for 8 days. And so we're going to be having someone come and speak with Rabbi Ben from the Department of Conservation, and talking about the importance of taking care of our earth and conserving energy. And then we'll start again in January. So it's just a year that we're hoping people will be aware of how they can get involved in Temple Sinai through our social action, and as the next step in Northern Nevada. So that's going to be, our next one is November 2nd. And thank you so much, Madam President.
Well, thank you so
Rabbi
much,
Ben.
Jill,
Thank you.
for
Thank you,
organizing. She really, I hope everybody knows what an incredible powerhouse Jill is here at Temple Sinai and all the programming we get to enjoy. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. I learned so much. I have 100 more questions for another day. So I hope everyone has a great afternoon. We're no longer in our new year, but we kind of still are. Can I still say
Still new, sure,
Shana
yeah.
Tova? Okay. I don't know when that ends,
You
that
got till the
little
end of
window,
Sukkot, you're fine.
but I think we can go with that. So thank you so much for joining us, and to our friends online also. Got some refreshments in the lobby.
Thank you, Michael, for running our test.
Yes, Michael Gordon, thank you so much for being our logistics and tech man. Thank you.